Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me we've got Mac.
Good evening.
And welcome back, Gio.
What's good, guys?
Today we'll be reviewing the FA Cup final and also catch up on what else is happening around the world of footy. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is at @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Now to the main match, Gio. Man City 2, Man U 1. Good game overall. I think it was entertaining for neutrals, definitely in terms of goals, and definitely one to highlight. But what were your overall thoughts on this game, Gio?
I thought it was fair. I thought it was fair. The score line was fair. City didn't have, the utmost City dominant like game. If I had to describe it that way. But again, they're clinical enough that sometimes they can have off days and still be able to outclass opponents quite easily at that. But in terms of the scoreline, I thought it was fair. And like in terms of the penalty call, did I think the second Gundogan goal was a little soft? Yes. But sometimes when it's in the moment, you're expecting a harder shot. One, you're expecting a harder shot, and two, trying to beat it through the traffic. It's tough. Again, when you're not there, it's tough. It's hard to explain what the player sees. So credits to Gundogan, who's obviously been in impeccable form lately, and again, we will probably talk about this in a couple of podcasts down the road where he might end up in the summer. But as of right now, he's in peak form, guarding a lot of tension, and it's the perfect time heading into the Champions League final.
Exactly. Back to this game, though. Interesting, Mac. You pointed out the midfield for Man U. They would have to start with a different looking midfield as there's a couple injuries there. Fred started next to Casemiro, and Christian Eriksen played that kind of 10 role with Sancho and Bruno Fernandes on each side and Rashford up top. City, though, they did revert back to sort of what actually got them to the Champions League final. That 3-2-4-1 formation. Kyle Walker did start as you sort of predicted with, I think, the Rashford threat. But also John Stones, Rodri anchored the midfield, and Ortega started at keeper, which, this being sort of his competition, it's nice to see that he did continue to feature. But the game really started with a bang, and Mac, walk us through that first goal.
It's tough because Manchester United, I would argue, it was really two individual errors because in this game that led to the goals against them. Of course, you can take a look at that. Yes, Man City played well, were able to take advantage, but really it wasn't a moment of brilliance. It wasn't as if they had strung like 30, 40 passes together to be able to kind of through ball. It wasn't Haaland overwhelming the defense. I would argue it was just you're turned off for the first 12 seconds. It's the fastest goal in FA Cup final. You're just not ready for a kind of a knockdown from Gundogan and De Gea not being ready for the shot at that moment from the distance. Phenomenal strike. Full credit, as Gio mentioned, to Gundogan for hitting a ball like that. But it's unfortunate because it's also an example of what happened later on in the game where it was simple as from a free kick. It wasn't just him leaving two or three people wide open. I understand you're zonal marking, you're not marking man to man, but to have nobody outside the 18 just to have it kind of put a body if something does pop out, I feel like that's a little bit rough. So again, it was small mistakes like that in the margins that ended up putting a result where even though Manchester City did dominate possession, it wasn't as if it felt like they dominated so many chances. It wasn't as if they were at their peak form. So even on their kind of not their best day, they still came out with the win and a solid performance. So good for them. But that first goal, it's a lack of awareness, a lack of readiness. And I think it's like 4 or 5 knockdown passes where Manchester United players lose one-on-one battles that led up to it. So again, it's unfortunate because again, if you just take those 2 mistakes away, Manchester United could very well be in a position to win this game. So a little bit rough on them in my opinion.
Okay, so Max giving us a picture that it was much closer than sort of what we expected. A close call as well, Gio, as you sort of touched on earlier, was the Grealish penalty where Ball's played in. Wan-Bissaka on the right hand side tries to header back across the box and goes off of Grealish's hand, which I think was overturned. Was given as a penalty by VAR. Gio, thoughts on that penalty? I think you said you weren't sure, but what are your thoughts?
I thought it was fair. Again, in a final where they are gonna be a little bit more strict after, obviously seeing what had happened in the Europa League final, which in things could have been called a penalty. I think they were more on top of things here. Granted, again, the note of law is that it stops the, his impediment to the ball stopped it from progressing forward. So by the rule of law, it is a penalty. So I thought it was a fair call, and Bruno did a great job of converting. So I don't think there's any argument there. I don't think there should be any argument there. It is what it is, and Man U got their goal off it.
Yeah, I do agree. It is, if you look at it and the way things have been refereed in England, that's a penalty based on the rules. It is quite a soft penalty to concede, and Matthew did say, Man U had chances there, 13 shots, 3 on target in total. But apart from that penalty, for me, not too much. I think Varane had a chance from a corner, and also late Scott McTominay goal line clearance in sort of added time after the 90. But apart from that, nothing really stood out too much for me. What did you think about their game plan overall?
The game plan overall, I feel like it was quite obvious in terms of just wanting to sit back, absorb pressure, and see if they can hit them on the break. There wasn't opportunities for that. I feel like neither team really created a whole lot of great opportunities. I felt like, and that was to Manchester United's advantage, because going in, the hope wasn't have kind of a high-scoring, free, open game, because you're going to lose that against this Man City team. So if United could be back, kind of absorb pressure and take their opportunities when they could be potentially in a good position. So I feel like their game plan was a little bit more successful in that way, and Man City never really hit their stride. I do want to jump back and talk about the penalty shout, because maybe this is full transparency, all the cards on the table. My Manchester United hatred there, but that's not much of a pen, because the way that Grealish is positioned, looking back, I could see why it was called, could see why it was overturned, but I feel like there has to be an adjustment there, because I don't know what he's supposed to do. Because you've seen a lot of calls where, for example, their hands are above their head and it's in an unnatural position. I would argue Grealish was in a natural position. As someone, I know I can't jump that high, but when I jump, my arms do move a little bit up, right? That's not unnatural. So I feel like, again, it's a very gray area. And you could see Grealish's reaction afterwards. He felt like the whole world is against him, especially after the game when Pep celebrated on his Gucci bag. But it was overall, from him, he felt very aggrieved, and I can understand that, and I can empathize with him, being in that position. And the interesting part was 30 seconds later, maybe not 30 seconds, but very soon afterwards, KDB was brought down in the box by Fred, and there was no penalty call there. So if I'm a Manchester City fan, I would feel a little bit aggrieved where, okay, if that a light one was given, how come this other light one wasn't, right? And then it's tough. So again, it goes back to the question of, who's refereeing on VAR, and then the picture came out with the guy being a Manchester United fan as well, which is not a great look. We're on his bio on Twitter. He's at Old Trafford. That's not the greatest look afterwards. At the end of the day, Man City did get the result, so they're not going to complain that much. But if the result went any differently, you would definitely see, except for, of course, people that don't want Man City to win, of course, they would feel much more aggrieved than they do at this moment. So I did want to touch on that. But going back to the game, in terms of the chances wise, this does leave me a little bit worried for City, because I felt like through this entire game, they never hit their stride. Haaland, again, did not get on the score sheet. His one really major opportunity, he kind of passed it to De Gea's feet. Aside from that, there wasn't much in it. It wasn't really linking play. He was visibly frustrated. So overall, even though they did come out with the win here, it does leave me a little bit concerned about how well they're going to play into the final game of the season.
Interesting, because I thought Haaland had a decent game overall. Obviously, as any striker wants to get on the score sheet, but his sort of hold of play and what he offers to bring those around him into the game, and sort of that turn of pace, I think in the first half against Varane, turned him so quick, so fast, and gets a shot off. Who, if that was on target, I think it would have been a difficult save for De Gea. But lucky, I guess, unlucky for him, it wasn't on target. I think it was decent. Gio, what do you think about Haaland sort of dropping off in terms of goal scoring in the latter stages of the season? Is there any concern there?
Honestly, for any other player, I would be a little concerned. Because when you rely on your midfielders to have to score and provide that offense, it gets a little tough sometimes. It's a lot easier to neutralize. But when your striker's on fire and he's able to pull away that defensive line to create chances for that midfield, then yeah, that's a different story. But we're talking about Haaland here, who in any given chance, whether it be in the air or just another opportunity to have another shot on goal, he's proven that he can break out of a slump quite quickly and again produce at a very high rate. So, am I really worried? No, I think his drive and what we've seen this season and his few seasons in the Bundesliga that he is always heads down and ready to go, no matter the circumstances. So yeah, I think it drives him even more that he hasn't been scoring and hasn't put in the numbers up on the score sheet. That makes that Champions League, that his possible first Champions League, that he wants to get on the score sheet even more. So I think it's even adding fuel to the fire, which if I'm a City fan, I'd be quite excited for, because he's going to be very physical, which the Italian league isn't quite all that used to, but that speed again is quite scary. So if I'm Inter Milan, I'm actually quite worried that he hasn't scored, because he's going to be hungry for goals and they're going to be looking to feed him anyways.
Yeah, and it just brings me back to, I can't remember which game it was. I think it might have been a Champions League game or maybe a Premier League game where Haaland, after the game, is recounting all the chances that he missed. Even though he scored, I think, maybe 2 or 3 in that game, he said, I could have scored 4 or 5. I could have done better for this. I could have been quicker or hit it cleaner in this opportunity. And so definitely something that I think, knowing sort of his record and what he can offer to this Man City team, I'm not too worried about that. But I guess just to wrap up this part, Mac, we have to mention, I think, Gundogan. 2 goals. Granted, his second goal, as you mentioned, was more of a help for Man U. But the way he's sort of finishing the season, it kind of points as well that there's been talks about him leaving potentially. This is kind of like the fairy tale ending, and it could be a fairy tale ending if they do get their win next weekend. What do you think about him in this season so far?
So he's definitely. It was interesting going back to our Premier League Player of the Year draft. He was a player that was not taken. Maybe hindsight being 2020. If I didn't have, because of such a hatred of Rodri, I would have taken him maybe instead in that position. So he does make the 15. But again, that was more games of shit because I didn't want you two to take him. So neither here nor there. If you want to hear more, go back and listen to that podcast. But for him, Gundo, I thought, again, it's a great swan song because the talks and the links have been more so with him leaving, in terms of all the reports where there hasn't been in terms of as much engagement from City ownership, City management to extend him. Again, that may all change if they get the Champions League as well. Then everyone is probably looking to get an extra 1 or 2 years in their contract just to come back and see if they can run it again, right? But in terms of having that opportunity to walk away kind of at the peak, he is in that position where he could really have achieved everything in club football within 1 calendar year. And in terms of coming from Germany, from Dortmund over to Man City and maybe looking for a different type of challenge. So it's really will be up to him. I feel like the club, in my opinion, Man City should want him back, should want to be able to bring him back, because the question is, if you do let him leave, how much money are you going to invest to replace him? Because you don't want to drop off on that level. So hopefully there is something sorted out there. There have been links to other even Premier League clubs, which I'm not too much of a fan for, to be completely honest. But that's neither here nor there. I think, though, what does worry about me in terms of, I don't kind of take the conversation a little bit backwards for the Haaland discussion. I do agree with both of you. I'm less worried about him in terms of having that drive, scoring enough opportunities if they're presented. I'm more worried about the players behind him playing up to the level to give him the opportunities, because he really only had that one opportunity in the game, in my opinion. And a lot of the other chances, you could see him getting very frustrated with Foden, Gundogan, KDB, Jack Grealish, where the timing of the pass that he wants wasn't provided. And that irritation he gives, he's going to go back, even though they won the cup, he's going to go back and practice this throughout this week and be like, hey, you should give me the ball here. You should give me the ball here. You should give me the ball here. And that's part of the evolution of this team, where at the beginning of the season, there was that break where only a couple people were doing it. And if that has dropped off and he's frustrated by it, you know that's going to be a focus of the team to get him back in. So I did want to kind of swing that back around as well.
No, that's fine. And so we'll wrap up the game from here. We'll take a quick break and then just touch on big picture what this means for both teams. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to Hustle Footy, guys. We are going to finish off today's podcast now, just discussing big picture what that FA Cup final means for both Man City and Man U. Mac, of course, this means Man City have now secured Premier League and the FA Cup with an eye for the big one, the Champions League next weekend. Sort of big picture, what does this mean for Man City, and how do they sort of approach next weekend?
I think it's a very interesting conversation we can have around that, because you could look at the season potentially successfully as Man City have won a double. It's the second time in their history that they've won both the Premier League and FA Cup within the same season. So, and it's not many clubs throughout Premier League history that have done that. So you have to kind of appreciate just the season that they've already have, and they definitely celebrated as such. However, I do think that if we fast forward a week from now and they lose the Champions League final, I think every talk show is going to start with, did they party too hard after the FA Cup? Because the celebration, I feel like, was quite, it should be almost, even though I take a look at it, and to use a kind of a Kobe Bryant saying, he's like, the job's not done, because this is really this was just a step for them of what their actual goal should be. Yes, you want to celebrate titles. This is great. This is great for the club, great for the city, great for the players, great for the manager. Full credit there. But this was just one step to what their actual goal is. If I'm them, this should have been a great, honest, have a nice night, maybe have something like a glass of wine, call it evening. But like, if you're going to be, almost naked sliding across the floor in celebration like Pep was, I think for the FA Cup, that's not the time for that celebration, because that kind of ruins the potential for, the Champions League. I don't know if they're looking past Inter Milan and thought that this was the more difficult game that they had to get through. Maybe that's part of the conversation. I don't know. But for me, though, it was a little bit, again, if I'm them, job's not done. They needed, this was, if you were to rank all their cups, if they were to lose this one and win the Champions League, still the best season in the club's history. So that should be their focus, in my opinion. But again, they still have quite a few days to rest and recover. So maybe I'm just being the old man on his lawn, which is definitely my calling card. But Great for them to kind of get the win, and put another trophy in the cabinet. I think one of the funny stats that I saw from this, if I remember, is that Phil Foden has averaged a trophy every 16 games he's played, something like that. It's obscene. The winning this team has done over the last couple of years. So, like I said, great to see them at it again, and they still have another week, and we'll definitely talk about that later, where they could be adding another one, the big one.
Definitely, for sure. On the flip side, Gio, Man U finished their season with a Carabao Cup, FA Cup final appearance, third in the Premier League. Looking back at it now, Gio, obviously it is disappointing. There's a loss that took place today, but are you happy? Was this a successful first season for Ten Hag at Man U? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think most definitely. I think, again, with what he has and obviously the plan he kind of says he has, there's still a lot to come. I'm sure there's a lot of players, on the out, and quite a few that are going to be coming in. I know he's very mum on his words about who they're looking to bring in, saying how the budget might not allow it, this, that, and the fourth. But he's keeping things under wraps. But I think he has a clear idea of what he wants to do with the club based on how he finished this season. Third place after, obviously closer to the end of the season where they were kind of in a slump, kind of dropping points here and there, and, could have very well ended up out of the top four, was also a very possible thing for to happen. For them to keep the composure, end off, the season with 2 strong wins, was just showed great composure, and that's important for a club that wants to obviously strive for more. But yeah, no, I think it was a a very solid season.
Yeah, one thing I sort of failed to mention is in the game, it's done now, but you can sort of tell that there is a big gulf in quality between both benches. Man U had a lot of injuries going into this game today, and something that Ten Hag will, I think, quickly look to fix as he is now sort of, shown his quality, and they should be able to trust him. That being said, Gio, in our last podcast, we sort of talked about some reports Man U players are linked to, and one of those players is Mason Mount. We had a brief discussion about how he would fit on the team. Not exactly sure how that would work, but what are your thoughts on that link to your club, Manchester United?
I don't know how it's gonna work with Bruno. It's gonna be tough unless you put Bruno out wide and kind of disregard the progression Sancho has made and the potential. You had us sold on Anthony, and I'm guessing the plan is to keep Anthony and have him progress as a Man United player. I don't know how that's really gonna work out. But again, would I be mad at it? No, because I think Man U, in the midfield are a clear, sore thumb of a problem. The lack of depth, the lack of young creative players, I think is an eyesore right now, and I think having the depth wouldn't be a bad thing, especially playing additional competitions, and even having the luxury, as say like a Man City does, to kind of roll the dice and kind of shift things around to see who can be that spark plug player. Having a player who's played in the Prem already, played at a bigger club already as well, is good. But hopefully they don't pay too much.
Yeah, I think was definitely one of the big factors, Mac. I think you were quoting their upwards of 50 for Mason Mount. I'm not sure if I'm putting words in your mouth, but did you see anything about his price tag? And what do you think about that?
Is he not up for? He's out of contract, if I remember correctly. Is that? Am I mistaken on that?
Let me see.
I think he should be out of contract.
Oh,
because I think that was the talk of it, where in terms of he's out. If he's out of contract, it would just be where you're not worrying about the transfer fee, you're worrying about the wage bill, and that's what potentially can be expensive for Manchester United, because they've done a good decent job of cutting their wage bill, and if they're going to go into a off season of trying to go for maybe get rid of Maguire, pay out his contract, and then you can use the difference theoretically to then pay for Mason Mount. I could see that as an upgrade, of course, because you're not as much worried, in my opinion, is in the depths in centre half, considering how well Lindelof has done. And reports were that Lindelof was being looked at by other European clubs, but Ten Hag said no shot, because he wants to be able to make sure he still has the depth there. So even if there is an injury, he's still a decent third choice centre half. And Luke Shaw has done a decent job in there, where if you do switch a Maguire for Mount, I think that's a big plus. But again, is that the right area of the pitch to go through? Yes, but is that the right type of player? Maybe. And it's really up to, and we highlighted a lot in our last podcast, right, where, if Ten Hag is a plan, he's really shown the goods this season. Give him the reins. Let him do it. Let him cook. Let him do what he needs to do and who he thinks he needs to bring in to be able to help build the type of team that he wants. And you see how far that can take you. So I think it was more so because he's out of contract why the links are being more reported, at least if I remember that correctly.
Just looking on transfer market, apparently his contract expires in 2024. So I think he's entering his final year. So we'll see. That should definitely drive his, I guess, transfer value down. But, still could be a lot, considering he, like you guys mentioned, has played in the Prem and, is could offer a different sort of dynamic to Man U going forward. But I guess let's talk about and switch our attention to some of other transfer news, players that will not require a transfer fee. Karim Benzema and Lionel Messi have played the last games for their respective clubs. I guess, quickly, what are your thoughts overall on this, and could there be a potential destination for these players?
So, First, to touch the one that I probably am a little bit more familiar with was Messi. It really comes down to three different choices. The reports are from PSG that he's played his last game. He's not going to come back. So it really comes down to three options. At least that's what have been reported. Is one, he goes back to Barcelona. Two, David Beckham wants to be able to bring it to Inter Miami, sign a contract there, and even potentially loan him out for the first year back to Barcelona, to then bring him to Inter Miami later on. And then the third option, of course, is everybody and their mum is going to go play for Saudi Arabia. Those are the three choices seems to be outlined that have been reported. It'd be very interesting to see which one he does pick. I think he's in a, so you can look at it where, okay, whatever he does, it doesn't matter. He's already achieved everything he wants to achieve. Maybe secure the bag. Maybe he wants more global recognition, whatever he wants. But I think that no matter what he does, it is a lose situation actually, because if he goes back to Barcelona, he could definitely put himself in a position where the club puts him above everything else that they're trying to do more long term. That's poor. Saudi Arabia, then he gets the connection to kind of what Ronaldo did, which even though they had a different representation about it going forward, so the outlook is definitely different. I still don't think I would not want to see that happen, because it's hard to watch in my opinion, one of the greatest the greatest player of all time, if not one of the best. It's hard to watch those games. How do you watch those games? I'm not interested in that. And Inter Miami going to MLS, again, that's such a large drop off in terms of competition level where you're not really seeing him play. It would be great for us because those TFC tickets for us living in Toronto, we're probably going to have to spend quite a bit of money if we're allowed to. But but at the end of the day, it's I feel like none of those situations for me are a clear win. So that's why it's hard to anticipate what I think he is going to do. What I think he should do, it's whatever he wants. I think that's the most important thing, because at the end of the day, he's already done everything he would have set out as his career to want to do. But again, if I peel back the second layer after doing what he wants, what I really want to do, just stay and maybe see if he can go for another Champions League run with another big club. So probably not Barcelona if they're going to do that, right?
I mean, there's talks about him potentially, like you said, playing at the highest level, not necessarily full time, but just so he could be fit enough for the Copa America next year, and then we'll see what happens from there. But Gio, alongside Benz and Messi, I think it was Eden Hazard that was confirmed by Fabrizio Romano to have parted ways with Real Madrid. What are your thoughts on those three players? Do you have one specifically that you want to talk about?
I've heard rumors about Benzema kind of like on the fence about Saudi Arabia. I mean, it'd be at his age to go there and make that amount of money is crazy. I'm sure he can stay one more year at Real Madrid if he wants to compete at a very high level and still earn that money then the following year. It really just come down to his drive and whether Carlo really has a plan for the team and if he buys into the vision for next season and agree with who they plan on bringing into the club to see again if they can make a deep Champions League run again, which I think is very possible. They live and die by that competition, so they're going to do everything in their power to try to get the right players in so that they're well equipped to compete in that competition. So it'll really just come down to whether or not he has that drive anymore to go out there and compete.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see what happens. Matt?
Yeah, I just want to read out Benzema's quote after he was asked about the links to Saudi Arabia. He says, quote, "Talking about my future for what? What is said comes from the internet, and the internet is not reality. I have a game on Saturday. I will train tomorrow. So right now I'm in Madrid." So it's literally playing on the fence of exactly, okay, am I leaving or right now I'm in Madrid and I'm trying to think of different options, because the reports are where it's not an individual club has made him an offer. It's the Saudi Arabian League have made him an offer and he gets to pick the club, which is weird. It seems like such an aggressive bid. Again, I do agree with you. I would have liked him if he does end up leaving, okay, but I would have liked at least another year to make sure that he can kind of, as reports are Jude Bellingham, have more of a reset where you're not kind of just dropping so many players off at the one time, similar to what Modric and Toni Kroos are doing, where next year, argument's sake, they played 35 games this year. Let's see them play 20 games, less minutes, be more of kind of a mentorship role to players coming in. And then next season, so Real Madrid don't kind of have to they could save some of their dust for next year when potentially the Mbappe situation come, and then you can look at a replacement 1-to-1 for him. I feel like that's much more if you are kind of a Real Madrid fan, kind of in ownership there. That seems much more of like a kind of a better long-term plan of how to transition the club going forward. But it'll be interesting to see what Benzema does here, for sure.
Yeah, and at the time, as I mentioned, with Eden Hazard leaving as well, and we saw this sort of immediately after the semi-final exit for Real Madrid in the Champions League. It seems like they're entering a transition period, so a lot of changes to happen there. A lot of changes will happen, I think, at Southampton as well, Gio, and there are links, I believe, from James Ward-Prowse to potentially Wolves, and that could clear up a space. That could mean one of those midfielders may move to Manchester United, or one of those players that you've always wanted. But Gio, what are your thoughts on that whole situation?
I think we all know who we're talking about, and it's Ruben Neves. I think his dream is to play for Barca. Whether or not Barca can afford him or even want him there, based on their plans. I don't really see him fitting all that well. There's a lot of midfielders that have gone to Barca and have failed, and are now at different clubs. So I think that he needs to tread very lightly there, and really come down and have a talk with his team and see what really is going to be the best fit. Obviously, we've seen what he can do, in the Prem level, or like at the Prem level. And if you asked me, who I'd prefer, him or Mason Mount, or as the group chat loves to call him, Manoj Mount. No, I'm picking Ruben Neves. I think he's a better fit for the team. But as Manchester United, they're always attracted to those English stars, as much as possible.
Yeah, and Mac, what are your thoughts about that?
Just want to jump in there because I think this has no implication on Ruben Neves. The reason why is because Joao Moutinho has already he's leaving Wolves. So I think the 1-to-1 replacement would be Ward-Prowse in for Moutinho in that midfield, and that's kind of why that change will happen there. And Lopetegui's plan, I don't think, is to let both of his kind of key midfielders go within the same transfer window. So I think that's a little bit more unlikely, and it's more of a 1-to-1 replacement. But I do like the thought, because there have been heavy links for Ruben Neves to a lot of other bigger clubs, given he has performed well in spurts over the last couple of years at Wolves. I do actually want to ask you, Ray, because I know this is a little bit of a fascination for some of the other players that I listed here for what we want to be able to talk about, because let's assume Benzema's leaving. Then the question comes, if not Mbappe, who to Real Madrid? The reports are Havertz has been heavily looked at. But at the same time, if I'm Real Madrid, why not go for someone that also used to play for Chelsea? Or, does he technically currently play for Chelsea? Because there's the whole situation with Joao Felix, where we don't know what he's going to do. Pochettino said, no, we don't want him back. We're not paying that money, or rather buy somebody else. And then the links are that he still wants to go back to the Premier League because he didn't enjoy his time at Atletico Madrid. Who can blame him? And the links have been to Newcastle or Aston Villa. Why not instead just go to the other Madrid club? I don't know. I just asking this question to you. I know that you're very close to heart of this. What do you want to see happen if, of course, Benzema does leave?
I do like both players, and so of course I wouldn't be opposed to them coming. It would be a lot harder for Felix to do so, coming straight from the rivals to Real Madrid, especially for a big price tag that he will definitely command. Which at this point, Madrid are kind of, it sounds weird, but kind of saving up all of their pennies for a big splash, I think, in the next transfer market next year. But I mean, it could work. Though for those two players, I don't see it happening at this time, unless it's maybe a loan or a sort of like what we've been seeing more recently, loan with option to buy in 2 years or something like that, depending on what Chelsea and Atletico want to do. Fitting into the Spanish league, I think, would be easier for Felix, having played there. But again, right now you are sort of looking at how you can not just replace Benzema's output for you in the front of the line, but also link up with Vinicius and potentially Rodrigo, whoever else is playing up there. So I think it's a tough situation, and it might require more than just one player at this time. So I'm not exactly sure those two players are the right answers, but something has to be done if Benzema is set to leave. But this season, I guess Gio, you also are a Madrid fan. What are your thoughts on these two players potentially joining there?
No, I don't think they should go for them. I think they should go for lesser known capable stars that similar to what Bayern Munich does. I think they should poach the Spanish league players. And I think there is a rumor going around that they are eyeing, if Benzema were to leave, or even as a backup option, is a player on Espanyol. Goes by the name of Jose Luis Mato San Martin. And apparently they've been eyeing him for quite some time, and he's been linked with Real Madrid as a backup striker. Even Bobby Firmino, who has been linked as well. I think those are better options than splashing the cash right now. If you're gonna splash the cash on, say, a Jude, and you really want to go full Galactico, you shouldn't settle for a Joao Felix, as we've seen. Although unfortunate, because the playstyle doesn't suit him at Atletico Madrid, but we've seen the output that he's had in the Spanish league, and isn't quite to Real Madrid's liking. So I don't think they should jump the gun and go for a player like that. I think you should really just poach, lesser known players, but still very tactical and well-rounded players in La Liga.
Yeah. Again, the transfer window is just opening up, and so a lot to change. We'll definitely cover what those changes as they come in our next podcast. So for now, we're going to conclude our podcast here. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be Friday, when we review the up-and-coming Europa League Conference Final and also preview the Champions League Final taking place next weekend. Thank you, Matt, for joining us.
I missed the chirp.
It's no longer here, but Gio's here, and thank you, Gio.
Peace out, guys.
See you guys soon.